Hello and welcome, a very warm welcome to episode 68 of The Green Bean. If it's your first visit here, an especially warm welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Katie, this little cutie is Jack, and we're chatting to you from my studio, which is in the Bannau Brycheiniog National Park in South Wales. And in these videos I like to share my creative projects, which include everything from drawing and painting to knitting and spinning, sewing and embroidery. However, you may have already spotted that I have a little finger injury, which means the kinds of projects I'm sharing in this episode are going to look a little bit different. So before we dive in, why don't I tell you the story of the finger injury? However, I'm going to share the PG rated version first. I will warn you, if you are squeamish, like me, I am, I will put a timestamp here so you can skip ahead if you don't want to hear the details of this story, and I will give it a strong warning. I would say if it hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't want to hear about it. So please feel free to skip ahead. And on that subject, I will also say, if you feel moved to respond by sharing a similar horror story of your own, please be mindful of people in the comments that might not want to read gory details, that might be squeamish like me. So if that's you, no judgment at all. The short story is, I injured my finger, I had a minor surgical procedure, I'm wearing this bandage for 10 days and then hopefully everything will be absolutely fine. So if that's enough information for you, please feel free to skip ahead and move on to the rest of the episode. For those of you who would like more details about what happened, I was working with my sewing machine and unfortunately sewed through my finger. I will be honest and say it's not the first time that's happened, but it is the first time that the needle has broken off inside my finger. I wasn't too freaked out at first, but it became clear that it was very well embedded and going to be very difficult to remove. Had to go at removing it at home first, and then went to minor injuries, which was on a Saturday night. They did their best. First of all, they tried to remove it without anaesthetic, which was horrible. They were unsuccessful. Then they tried to anaesthetise my finger to remove it. The anaesthetic was also unsuccessful, and I have read that local anaesthetic in particular can have different and lesser impacts on neurodivergent people. So I was really, really freaked out by that point. Having spent 2 hours in there with them trying to remove this thing and not succeeding, they then said, actually, we can't do it, you need to go to accident and emergency. So on my Sunday morning, I went to the accident and emergency department and had not too bad a wait. I'm sure you've heard horror stories of waiting times in accident emergency units here in the UK. I didn't have to wait too long to be seen. The team were brilliant, very understanding, because by that point I was in quite a lot of not only physical discomfort but emotional discomfort. I'm phobic of needles, I'm phobic of hospitals. The whole thing was very upsetting for me. They were very patient and understanding. They gave me a tetanus jab because they were worried about infection. They also gave me some antibiotics and took an x-ray, and then they decided that they weren't going to remove it there and then. They referred me to a different hospital, 3 different hospitals now, a few days later for a surgical procedure to remove it. And I was really frightened by that point. I was frightened because in the first hospital the anaesthetic hadn't worked, so I was worried they were going to have to do it without pain relief. I was worried that the procedure they referred me for was in another 3 days, so I had 3 more days of waiting, which were full of anxiety and horror. But in the end, I needn't have worried. The surgical team were absolutely brilliant. The NHS is amazing. And actually, despite the long wait and the stress of it all, it ended up being the best possible outcome, because when they opened up the injury, they found not only the main piece of needle in my finger, but also an additional shard which had broken off. And I just keep thinking, if they had removed it in that first minor injury unit, they wouldn't have found the extra shard that had broken off. So I would have potentially had many years of pain and discomfort and not understood why. So in the end, I had a good experience of the removal, but the whole thing was very upsetting, very stressful, very painful. And I've no wish to repeat the experience. I will be taking a lot more care with my sewing machine. I've already purchased a little finger guard to put on it so that I'm less likely to stick my fingers underneath the needle. But all in all, it could have been more horrible than it was. I feel very lucky and I was very well cared for. So yes, I'm on the mend. I just need to wear this bandage for another week. Then I'll be able to take it off and see what the damage is. I'm guessing there's going to be some nerve damage to the tip of my finger. I might have some changes to the sensation there, but really it could have been a lot worse, so I was very lucky. Welcome back to those of you who didn't listen to the gross part of the story. The first few days of recovering from my little surgical procedure, I was really in too much discomfort to do anything creative at all. But now that I'm well on the mend, I have been, as always, wanting to keep my hands busy. So in this episode, I've got... hold on, Jack. I've got some drawing to share with you. Very luckily it was my non-dominant hand that was injured, so I've been able to do plenty of drawing. I've also been working on some cross-stitch, so I've been really enjoying that. It's amazing how much progress you can make on a project when it's the only thing that you work on, the only thing that you can work on. So I've been progressing with my cross-stitch, and I've also got a new felt applique project that I've started. But one more thing I wanted to mention before we dive into the creative part of the episode is how much I enjoy jigsaws when I'm not very well, and it just happened to be perfect timing. I had a brand new jigsaw to work on. Let me just reach and grab it if Jack will let me. My lovely friends at John Arbon Textiles have turned my sheep in the mill illustration into a jigsaw, and as someone who has always loved jigsaws, I spent a lot of time working on them, not only in lockdown during the pandemic, but since then I've almost always had a jigsaw on the go. It's one of my favourite relaxation activities. I love to sit and work on a jigsaw, listen to an audiobook, and particularly while I was waiting for my hospital appointment and recovering from the procedure, just the comfort of digging into a jigsaw was so wonderful. And it's always been a dream as an illustrator to have my own drawing turned into a jigsaw. So huge thanks to my pals over at John Arbon Textiles for actually making that dream come true. I can't quite believe it. There are lots of companies that produce sort of print on demand, get your own design on a jigsaws, but the folks at John Arbon did a good search around and found a UK-based company who make puzzles for people who love puzzles. You know, I don't just love jigsaws for jigsaw's sake. There's something about having a good quality cut, pieces that are unique so you know when you've got a piece in the right place. All of that makes for a good experience of doing a puzzle, and this puzzle is one of those. So I was delighted to be able to get stuck in on this during my recovery, and if you fancy having a go at it, they've got them over in the John Arbon Textiles shop, and I will certainly be snapping up a few of these for gifts for some of my puzzle loving friends as well. But without further ado, let's go magically back in time to a time before I had an injured finger, take Jack out for a lovely walk, and then chat to you about what I've been making lately. In terms of drawing, well, drawing and painting, I guess, I've been working on this little piece, which is a new compliment slip from my shop. Basically, it's a note that goes in with my orders to say, thank you for supporting my work, thank you for helping me do what I love every day. I like to change up the things that I add into my orders every couple of years or so, just so that so that it's nice for people who order frequently to collect different things, and it's nice for me to kind of have a new visual thing to look at while I'm packing parcels. So this one was very much inspired by my recent trip back to Dartmoor. If you have watched my videos for many years, you'll know, but if you're new here, I lived on the edge of Dartmoor, which is in Devon in the southwest of England, for the last 10 years, and I've only recently moved to Wales, and I feel very fondly about Dartmoor. I will always feel very emotional about it, very attached to it, and many of the beautiful walks shared in my videos over the years have taken place on Dartmoor, so it only feels right to have a visual representation of that beloved place as part of what I send out with my shop orders. So I based this illustration on my recent times on Dartmoor. I drew a little self-portrait of me and Jack just standing there and waving, and I started in black and white. I drew the outline in my beloved Pigma Micron pen, and then I added the colour with washes of coloured ink. I use calligraphy inks to colour rather than watercolours, and this is just a bizarre quirk of my creative process. They're an art material that I started using way back when I was in art college, and I came to really like them because, unlike watercolours, these colours are permanent once they're dry. So when you use watercolours, you add washes and the layers can kind of blend and soften into each other, whereas with these inks, once the layer's down, it is permanent. So it means a slightly different thought process behind building up layers of colour than you would if you were using watercolours. I still like to work from light to dark. I start with the paler tones and then build up the darker tones, but it just requires a little bit more planning and thinking about. But the advantage is that you can keep adding colours and the tones don't get muddy. So if you were doing watercolour and you added For example, this bright green that I've used on top of a grey, the grey would bleed into the green and the green would look a bit sludgy, whereas here the grey doesn't bleed into the green at all. It keeps both of those colours really sharp, which is why I like using these inks rather than watercolours. So I built this colour up in several layers over several days. I like to let the layers dry thoroughly before adding the next layer of colour and the next layer of colour, to build it up really slowly. And then finally I will add a few details of shading just with coloured pencil. I love working with the inks, but for very fine control and details right at the end, I like the subtlety and precision of working with pencils. So I'm adding just a few pencil details to this before scanning it in. And the scanning is a very important stage as well, because it means I get to make any changes. So looking at this finished artwork as it is, the sky, I love how dramatic the sky is. It's very indicative of a moody Dartmoor sky, but it's actually a little bit bolder than I wanted. I want to add some text across here to say thank you, and I usually like to write a personalised thank you note with my orders as well. So I will need to tone the sky down a little bit, which I can do digitally. The other advantage of scanning it in and getting to make changes is I can correct mistakes. So there's an accidental splodge of dark ink here right above my head, which I will be able to get rid of digitally before I send this thing off to print. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how this piece turned out, and I think it's going to be a lovely little new thank you note to send off with orders from my shop. There aren't a great many crafts that you can do that only mostly use your non-dominant hand, and I suppose in time I could get used to not using this finger to knit or to spin, but actually I've only got this thing on for 10 days, so I decided the best thing to do was to leave off my regular crafts, pick up something else, and I went for cross-stitch, because cross-stitch, although I hold the hoop in my non-dominant hand, that hand doesn't have to do very much. Most of the work happens with my right hand. So I actually started this cross-stitch just a couple of days after my surgery, and I've made loads and loads of progress. You may ask why I didn't pick up the cross-stitch project I've been working on long term. I have been working on a piece called Camping Toads by Mama Witch Cross-stitch. There are two reasons why I didn't pick that up. One is because it's on black fabric, and two is because it's a very fine stitch count. I think it's 20 stitches to the inch. And I am in a transition stage at the moment. I'm waiting for a new prescription pair of glasses specifically for doing close work, and I've been getting migraines from doing close work without those new glasses. So in the interest of not making myself feel worse than I already did with the finger, I decided to start a new cross-stitch project with a bigger stitch count. This is 14 stitches in an inch, and it's on a light background fabric, so all in all it's less stressful for my eyes and just easier. I needed something easier to work on as a comfort project while I was recovering from my finger procedure. The designer is the same. This is another piece by Mama Witch Cross Stitch, and it's actually from their Patreon. It was quite a while ago, so if you're looking for the same pattern you have to go back in time a little bit to find it on their Patreon. But it's called Live Green, and the actual design has the text Live Green at the top here. But I've made quite a few modifications to this piece, mostly because I wanted to get started immediately the day after I came back from hospital, and I didn't have the specific recommended colours in my stash, so I had to forage through my collection of cross-stitch threads and pick out a palette that was similar enough but also worked with my natural linen background. I think the pattern is designed for either a white or very pale blue background, which I didn't have, and also it probably wouldn't have been my preference anyway. I really love the look of the natural linen, so I picked out a selection of threads that I already had, so I didn't need to wait or go out and buy anything specifically to start this project. I was able to just crack on with it. So I've made a few changes to the placement of the different colours, as well as changing the colours that I used. I specifically wanted these mushrooms to be red because I love red mushrooms. So I think down on the front here there's going to be a big red and white spotty mushroom. But the overalls that the frog was wearing, I just wanted to bring more of that red into the pattern, so I decided to make the overalls the same colour as these red mushrooms. And the kind of shirt that the frog is wearing had a white circles pattern on it, which I felt looked a little bit busy and detracted from all of this beautiful work on the border, so I've just been stitching the shirt plain in this kind of peachy beige colour. I'm so pleased with how this is looking. I can't help but feel it looks a little bit like a self-portrait, and I'm happy with that. I love how the power of crafting means that a project that was started and picked up during a really difficult time, you know, it was really stressful for me dealing with this finger experience, but what's going to come out of it is a project I would never have picked up at this time for any other reason, and I get to create something that's beautiful, and I will finish it, hopefully. No promises, but you know, eventually I might finish it, hang it on my wall, and yeah, it will remind me of the horrible finger experience, but it will remind me of taking care of myself and getting through that horrible experience. And to me, that's the power of our craft and creative work, is that we get to transform difficult experiences into something beautiful. And I love that, and I love how this piece is looking. I'm really, really enjoying it, and it does get me thinking about perhaps having a go at translating some of my designs into cross stitch. I never thought I would get into cross stitch. It never particularly appealed to me as a craft, but I've come to really enjoy it in the last year or so. It's very soothing and relaxing. It's sort of like the world's slowest colouring in. It's very peaceful and soothing, and the rhythm of the stitches is really nice. So yeah, I am gently thinking about exploring turning some of my art pieces into cross-stitch patterns, but for now I'll just carry on stitching on this one and hopefully turning it into something I can hang on my wall. I also want to share a new felt applique project that I've started. As my finger is starting to feel better, I'm able to move it around and I've got a lot more capability to work on creative things, so I've been thinking about what else I can take up. Still, because of the bandage, I can't knit or spin, but I thought I could pick up a felt applique project, and I've been inspired to create a case for my magnifying glass. I use my magnifier at my desk when I'm drawing, particularly drawing lichens, very fine, detailed drawings, and this magnifier just lies around in my studio and I'm really worried about the lens getting scratched. So I've wanted for a long time to make a case for it. I decided to make just a little felt pouch, but why would I not decorate that felt pouch with something? And the thing that came to mind was a piece that I created last year. Actually, I had a go at making it as a painting and it never quite worked out. Can you remember, I maybe talked about it across a couple of episodes, working on this design of a foraging frog wearing dungarees going hunting for mushrooms, and you can see why the cross stitch I've been working on has inspired me to revisit that idea. And I love how, you know, sometimes a piece just doesn't work out in the way you expect it to. I expected it to be a painting that I loved, that I could sell perhaps as a print or a greetings card in my shop, but the painting just didn't, I didn't love it. I wasn't pleased with how it turned out. But now I'm thinking, well, let's have a go at turning that into a felt applique design and see if I like it that way, and in the process make a piece, make a thing that I really need, which is a cover for my magnifying glass. So that's what I'm working on. I've picked out this limited colour palette of felt pieces. I've always got a stash of wool felt because I just love it. It's a beautiful material to work with. I use it to make little felt appliques as gifts, and it wasn't difficult for me to pick out a pleasing selection of greens and browns for this project. So what I do when I'm working on a piece of felt applique is I print out or draw out a paper template and then use that as a cutting template. So I actually cut through both the paper and the felt at the same time to make sure I get the pieces to be the shape and size that I need them to be. Then I gently stick my felt pieces in place, usually just with a tiny spot of glue. Mostly I'm going to attach them by stitching, but to make sure that they don't shift around during that process, I'm just attaching them gently with a little bit of glue so they stay in place while I get to stitch them down. So I've just finished stitching down the frog, and I wanted to point out that I've left one of the hands off on purpose. This wasn't an accident. It's because frog is going to be holding a basket, so the basket will be stitched here, and then the hand, the bit that's gripping the basket, will be stitched on top of that, so it'll be like an extra layer in the collage. And speaking of the collage, you can see I've left this foot loose as well. That's because well, I got excited and wanted to do the frog first, but actually I want to put a tree going up the side here, and this foot will want to go on top of the tree. So I've left that loose for now, and I'll be able to tuck the tree underneath and then stitch the foot down on top. once I've got a felt piece in the position I want it to be, sometimes they just stay as they are without embellishment, but quite often I will add texture using embroidery. So here I'm doing a little bit of backstitch just to emphasize the lines on the frog's dungarees. These are intended to be corduroy dungarees, so adding the embroidery in a very similar tone to the felt just enhances that texture and makes it look like they are real corduroy fabric. Much like drawing or painting, I actually really love how working with this limited colour palette of felt pieces is bringing this design together. Sometimes when you're painting, if you've got the whole box of colours to choose from, it's overwhelming and the resulting piece can look quite dissonant. But if you pick, 3 or 4 colours and paint only using shades of those, it somehow brings a piece together. It looks more coherent, and it's really nice to see how that translates to working in a completely different medium. I'm just using felt and thread, but somehow using that really limited colour palette brings the whole thing together. And yeah, this is going to be a slow project. It's going to keep me busy for a little while, but so far I'm pleased with how this is looking, and I think it's going to make a really cute case for my magnifier. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of The Green Bean. I hope you've enjoyed spending some time here, hearing about my creative projects, even if they weren't quite the projects you've come to expect. I hope that I will be back soon with knitting and spinning. It might be a little while before I brave the sewing again. I'm feeling a little bit frightened about that, but knitting and spinning for sure I hope to be able to return to. But in the meantime, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who supports these videos financially, whether that be on Patreon, where I offer ad-free access, extra videos, all kinds of bonus content, or Coffee, where you can buy me a cuppa or buy Jack a treat, or my shop, where you can buy things that I've illustrated, zines, knitting patterns, rubber stamps, stickers, all that kind of stuff. All of those things go towards making these videos possible and helping me get to do the work that I love doing every single day. So thanks to everyone who is part of that and makes these videos possible. I couldn't do it without you. I wish you happy crafting and a time free of finger or other related crafting accidents, and I hope whatever projects you're working on, they're going smoothly. I will see you soon. Take care. Bye.